Thank you for your immense feedback. Good grief, that's a lot of people. I'm really happy that some of this is making sense. I'm hoping that I can bring the rest of it into focus in a way. I do have some questions that were asked, and I think I should start with those answers the best I can, but I don't want to get too far off the course. The one thing I will say to the lady who got up on her horse and asked what's next, what's next would be get off. And I say that because if it's not clear what to do after you've sat up there, it needs to be clear to one of you. And if it isn't clear to you, it might get clear to him in a real hurry. So I would just step down in a nice way and just tell him or her what a great little horse they are. And this has got a lot of glare here. I guess I'm not going to get too worried about it. I can't. Good grief, what is this? Okay, anyway, we'll just run with it best we can. I wouldn't hang out too long without help if you don't know what to do when you get on your green horse. You know, there's a lot of power there, and there's probably a nice relationship that you have, but the thing is, when you get on a horse, you got to remember that the power changes between your control of his feet on the ground and his control of your destiny when you're on his back, and his also possibility to control when you are on the ground again. You want to have that control about who puts who on the ground. That should be your decision, and it should happen at a time when it's safe to get off. I would be very worried if I were your I'm worried no matter who I am. I'm worried to hear you send me a letter like that. What do I do now that I can get on and off him? You didn't say anything about getting off, but I assume you did. The key is going to be, what do you do when he decides he's going to go forward? Are you going to pull back on both reins and hope he knows that that means that you want him to stop? And if you want him to stop after he takes 2 steps, how are you going to teach him to lope and canter? I think you ought to get some help. So that's about all I'm going to say right now. This is not a colt starting class at the moment. I will be happy to, I'll be happy to discuss things with you later, but this might not be quite the format. Good question, though. My delay in getting started was that I had to go find some materials to to bridle up my horse. Here's who we're going to use because his mouth is open. And then I have another little guy that I found. Looks a little perkier. He's about as perky, but he's got more motion built in. He's also a bit more collected. And I only picked these things because, after all, these things are built from life. Here is some natural flexion for you. There's some natural flexibility. I don't know what sort of fly would produce that, but probably at that age in a horse, any fly would. There's no tail to handle the job. Anyhow, this type of flexibility is what happens when you don't use fly spray and you don't over blanket your horses, and you do let them have at least some, if not a lot of time outdoors doing what horses do. The horses that do this recreationally and in the process of keeping themselves clean, well-maintained, and bug-free, these horses are as flexible as you'd ever need. So there is always going to be the debate about the toss-up between the risk of getting a horse dirty or hurt and the nature's way of keeping him flexible and prepared and ready enough for you to ride, as is. Here is a little horse, a picture of him with his back legs going out in 2 directions. That would be kind of what happens when they land on the forehand in sort of a half-baked sliding stop, and they attempt to get themselves slowed down. And when they're young and kept outside and running in a herd, something like that is normal, that type of thing. On a stalled horse that does this on the ice or the mud, or a horse that's older and only been worked in circles, that could be about the end of your stifles, or the end of a lot, your sacrum, this is a move for a young horse that would be normal. And you want to make sure that if you put yourself, your saddle horse or your stalled horse, in a situation where he has to do that to handle the environment that you're riding in, you want to make sure that he's really up to the job, okay? So I'm going to put a little bridle on our warhorse here. Here's our little head stall, just for looks. And I'm going to put a little noseband on him. There's his noseband. And I'm going to put his throat latch under here, and that's about it. Okay, that's all the bridle he gets right now. I got these zip ties. This is, hey, when in Rome, you know, you just got to do what you got to do. I'm going to make myself a little, the best I can, a little thing here out of these zip ties to give myself the ability to do some long lining. And I do think that long lining done well is a super way to get your horse and yourself communicating about posture and direction and speed. Okay, so here's his little bridle shape, or his little, there's his cinch shaping up, and here are his homemade things. This is really sort of makeshift, but nevertheless, I really feel that it's important to share some of the things that I've learned over the years, because you never know when you're not going to be doing it. So I think before it's needed and missed, I will do it, and then you have it. Okay? Now, I'm going to take a break for a second. I got to get some scissors, and I'll be right back. Now, you would think between last night and today that I would have had time to do this, but in the life I'm in right now, minutes matter, and they matter a lot. Oh boy. Anyway, just a second. It's called the right tool for the job, and this is not it. Okay, hang on. Okay. Well, this isn't working out too well. Bear with me. I'm fixing this harness. So the point I'm gonna, forget it, can't do it. The point I'm gonna make here, I'll just put his little harness back on here, and I'm gonna set him up with something that I hope will be visible to all of you, sufficient to understand how to shape your horse. The thing that just never fails to amaze me is how people get on Colt starters, for heaven's sakes. They get up there and they start right in with an active outside leg on a horse that they have belabored the groundwork. And you know, on the ground, let's just face it, on the ground, what do? On the ground, you're not over there giving him an outside leg, are you? You're not over there supporting his hips and trying to keep his haunches on some circle. You're asking him to step over away from you, for heaven's sake. So don't be surprised when he bucks you off. That's all I can say. Okay, here we are. Now, here we have some reins. Kind of makeshift, but nevertheless. Okay, so here's your horse. And I'm going to, just at the moment, we're going to just talk about these reins from the horse's point of view. And I hope, are you guys on there? You can see this? Wouldn't that be nice if I could see you seeing this, but I can't? All my friends out there. Gee whiz. New friends and old friends. Nice to have you here on this winter day in New England. All right, here we are. Let me see now if you can see this. Oh boy, I don't really know what you can see. I still haven't learned how to get this writing out of here. Does anybody know how to do that? Oh, you can see. Can you see this horse? I can't see a thing below my own chin, okay? This is where my view of what's happening stops. So, can you see this horse and these reins? That's all I'm asking. Can you see these reins here? I can read yes or no down there. Somebody tell me, please. All right, well, I'm going to keep going. Here's this horse. So, in this situation where he is going left, and let's say, for the moment, let's just say you have this as your lunge line, okay? You're lunging him. I'm not in the picture now, just a minute. So, I'm lunging my horse. Here you go. And I'm looking right here. This is going to be the direct rein. This is his leading rein. and I'm saying, hey, come on, let's go, let's go. But my core energy is right in front of him. I'm looking right at his face, okay? And so a lot of these horses they'll stick their hips out to the right in this case, and they'll face you, and they'll get heavy in front, and then there you are, stuck. And a lot of people then they'll go like this, and they'll say, hey, go over here. See his head here? Can you see his head? Go over here. Okay, so here's my left hand. By the way, yesterday I got all the left and right wrong because I was confused about the way I had misread all the posters and stuff a couple months ago. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm dyslexic, because fortunately I'm not. You were right on the left and right. If you were watching, I was incorrect. All right, so here I want him to move away, and I want him to go back out on the circle. If I go like this, I've got already my left hand in his eye blocking him. It doesn't matter that the leading rein is asking him to go there, because I'm blocking him. And no fewer times than he's probably been pushed back or scolded, or somebody's gotten after him for getting too close. Why would he want to come near that hand? So here I am saying, if you don't go to your right, over here, I'm going to whack you on the shoulder. Maybe I'll whack you in the nose if you come over at me. Maybe I'll come right around here and I'll pull you forward, and I'm going to whack you on the shoulder and tell you to get away. But hey, even if he did, what would he do? He would just go here and face me. That's why I said yesterday, you got to start holding a couple coils back. See how I'm doing this? So then you drop that. And if you're going to liven up from back here, this is such a ridiculous thing. Anyway, you liven up from over here, he can go, see you later, and then he's out on the end of your line. But none of that is going to happen easily, and yet, unless you're pretty skilled at working a horse from back to front and not having him think you want to either get in a fight or run you over. So what I would suggest is that you work him farther back here, and you're going to have your core energy, which is right here. When I say that, I'm talking about your belly, your solar plexus, your chest, your face. Aim that right here. So here's his back here. And I'm going to come in about a couple meters, if he were big, about a couple meters behind his tail, right about here. And I'm going to look there, and that's going to make him want to see what I'm looking at. And as he wants to see, he sees me sitting there. I'm looking back there. He's going to want to do this and look right over there too. He's going to want to turn around and see what I'm looking at behind him. Right here, this horse felt something on his hock, turned right around. He's going to feel me looking behind his hock. That will bring him on the circle, you see? So that's what we want. So now, this understanding of the leading rein, we have to remember that even when you have two reins, and here's my two reins now, whether I'm riding or long lining this horse, in this position, it is a leading rein, and this is a supporting rein. But the minute his head comes here in center and tips 1 degree to the right of center, now we have a new leading rein, we have a new opening rein, and a new support rein over here. So each rein goes with what your mind wants, if you're clear about his point of view. Okay, so you're sitting up here. Here you are. You've got a leg on each side, which he can see. I wish I knew if you could see this horse. This is driving me mad. Maybe, so I turn the light on so you can see him. I don't know. I hope you can see him. Anyway, so here are your legs. We'll say for this exercise that the rider is looking here, the horse is looking here. You've got a hand on an outside rein and a hand on an inside rein, but suddenly you need to go over here for some reason. So as he passes the center line here, your opening rein becomes your supporting rein. There are regionally different names for these things. I'm going to give them to you now just to confuse the situation a little bit for you. It doesn't really matter what you call it as long as you know what to do with it. But here it is. When you have a leading rein, this is also sometimes called an inside rein or a direct rein, or in this case it would be the left rein. It's also called an opening rein. Okay, it's many words. And for those of you who speak other languages, I'm sorry, but we have a lot of ways to talk about this. I'm sure in your respective countries you probably also do. So in a left turn, with all these different things, I'll give you a quick review. Opening rein, leading rein, direct rein, left rein, That's enough. The outside rein is called a supporting rein, an outside rein. Some people call it a bearing rein or an indirect rein. Okay, that's scramble up your head. But I wanted to mention all of that in case you run into it in the future or read it. Now you know what we're talking about. So the name associated with these reins changes the minute the function that they are to serve changes. So when this guy puts his head here, and you decide you're going to go over there to the other side of town or the other side of a pasture, you now have, on your right, you have an opening rein, a direct rein, a leading rein. Okay? It's your right rein in this case. This then becomes the bearing rein or the support rein, the indirect rein. Now, there's no point in really even talking about the reins if you're not aware that they are not intended to be the accelerator. When you pick up these reins and your horse goes, alarm bells should go off for you, because this is not the accelerator. This is not gasoline and a match. And there are many horses that when you pick up the reins before you get on, horse is already leaving. And a lot of people that I know just hurry up and try to get up there the best they can, and I've seen plenty of times when people are still trying to get their outside stirrup and the horse is at a slow trot or sometimes even a fast trot and they're posting without stirrups, just fishing around with their foot, trying to poke that foot in there as fast as they can, and by the time they get organized, the horse is at a lope. That's called getting run off with, by the way. And I wouldn't do it. There's nothing amusing about it. I don't like seeing it. Good way to get hurt, and it's a really terrible thing to teach a horse to do. And I say teach a horse because if you're his trainer and rider, the things that you tolerate also become the lesson. It's very hard to understand, I think, for some people, that what you put up with and what you allow him to do or step back and shape him to do with a permissive kind of helpless release of his responsibility for his decisions. You really need help if you're doing that. You got to get somebody to help you if you're in the process of creating a horse that has learned how to take over or does take over. Things can go wrong quite quickly, if you want to know the truth. So I wouldn't encourage that. Okay. So let's talk about now on the ground how I would get this horse to understand with a lead rope. I'm just going to pull this close here. So now I'm on the inside of this turn, and I'm going to be lunging my horse, believe it or not. You see my rope here? You see my little horse? I can't see a thing, so I'm just trusting that you can do it. He's going to my left. I've got my little rope here. And what do you know? He's actually still staying on an arc to the left, and he is going forward. I didn't say how fast, and I didn't say anything else about how to get this to happen. I'm just showing you that this is what I do, and in person I can show you how to do it. There are some opportunities for that coming up actually in Italy and Spain. You can look on just keep track of the website or where I am or in these various ways people know that type of thing. Right now I can't think about that. I'm just saying I can show you this spring if you're around. I will show you. But right now what I want to show you is that this rein in this position can also, depending on how you handle it and where you put it, this can also straighten him and teach him to back up. If you're standing here and you're behind him and you have this going down the left side of his body, like your left leg, this will straighten him out and he will understand that this is a supporting right rein and this is a supporting left leg, and he can stay between your rein and leg and learn how to back off one rope. A single line, to be able to ride on a single line, straight on a single line, is really important, and the horses that I prepare for myself or for other people when I have the opportunity, I prepare those horses on a single line. And the reason I do that is to help the horse in the future if he ever has a rein break or somebody has to jump on him and go somewhere with just a lead rope, one line, okay? So if you are going to be on him bareback, let's say, and you just have this is your right rein, or right rein to go right, that's your left supporting rein to go left. So you look left and open your toe, this rein can take him there. And you look to the right and open your right toe a little bit at the elbow, let that elbow through, and your calf can send his hips to the left a little bit with your toe open. You just kind of work your calf a bit. I'm not talking about kicking him now. You just open up and pew, off you go. Okay, so that's a way to do that. And I have tons of film of this, tons of film. Next step is to get all that put into a little instructional package for people if they want to see it. I'm working on it. For years I'm working on it. Now, let me show you another part of all this. Here's the fantasy. Okay, there he is. I don't know whether young boys think about this, but I know young girls find that there's a lot of marketing to get them to think about meeting the unicorn and dancing around in some sort of fantastic fantasy space. Maybe, I don't know, but, maybe it could be this is what the men think about. I don't know. I found that horse in Berlin one day and brought him home. What a thing. Can you imagine that? So, that's my idea of a joke, okay? That's hilarious, right? All right, anyway, whether you're raised on horses as fantasy items or whether you are actually involved in some version of this fantasy yourself, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't get hurt. That's really what matters. So, all these things that I'm telling you about and that I'm wanting to share with you have come at a price. I have always loved horses, and I've always done my best to rise to whatever challenges are involved in helping the ones around me that other people don't seem to have answers for. Doesn't mean I have the answers when I go into it either, but if you learn how to read a horse and listen to him, you can figure out what to do. There's no doubt about it. The horse is going to try to tell you, and even his inability to tell you, if you know what you're looking at and you know how to read what you're seeing, you can learn from that. Okay, so I want you to look at this, and from the horse's point of view, I now am riding here, okay? So what I meant before about releasing the rein to the direction of travel, I'm going to this way here now. So before I just try to pull his face away from my hand here and have all this chaos go on his mouth, I might just release this rein a bit and open here on a green horse so that he could see my hand come out, and he'd say, oh, what's going on there? And then just the process of looking left while he's in motion, walking or trotting, is going to bring him in that direction. And if you don't hang on his face back here and try to telescope his jaw and face into some poorly timed application of unnecessary collection for the sake of it. Collection for the sake of it is not a pretty thing. It really isn't. And I think that one of the things that we unfortunately do in our groundwork far too early and in our riding far too early is that we don't let the horses run. We don't let them move. We want to collect them with the idea that we're going to get control in collection. So how we got control in collection right here? We nailed his feet right to the rocker. That's why he's a rocking horse. Full control. But basically, in this position, you're at far greater risk of being out of control, because by the time this chin has gotten much past beyond here, you have no control anyway of the feet, okay? Because the telescoping, overflexion, straight back thing that is done in early groundwork really causes a horse to be able to go in tight circles, in strict or conservative, normal, what's considered the status quo. I'm not knocking it. It's just it doesn't serve you, because in the end you end up with vet bills and horses that need our injections is 4 years old, and you've got damage to the joints, not the cartilage like everybody says. It's damage to the joints. It's damage to the alignment of the feet inside the hoof. It's all this stuff that goes on from overflexion speed in confinement and overflexion changes the actual angles on which these horses have to circle endlessly in both directions, and they don't actually get to flex at the pole the way they should, or even if they do a little bit, that change does not come through the rib cage. So the training in that sense is that you get set up to in effect sit on a saddle that's on something like a railroad tie or a barn beam, or a park bench with no flexibility in the middle, and you just have this little wobbly head on the end, and you're hoping for the best. Now, I'm sure that I have seen, and I know people that do a much better job than that, but we're just talking about the norm here. The people who find their way to me are not the people that have the right answers necessarily. So what I'm trying to make sure that you really get clear on here is that just to have a flexible pole, whether it's longitudinal flexion, which would be this way over the top from the nose to the tail and down, this is longitudinal, and lateral flexion, which would be what? Do I have an example of that? Okay, well, this is no horse, but this guy has got a little lateral flexion in his jaw going here. Okay, he thinks he's centaur, I guess. So there, he's got lateral flexion. This is also lateral flexion, but it's at the root of the neck. My God, I never thought I'd be doing a demo with these fake horses, but it's all I have. They're real enough. So there you have access to the whole neck column, the cervical column, and you have a real job. That horse has a serious job. He wants that fly off that hock, and who blames him? Not I. So all I'm saying is this little empty head response, the pole and the cervical head bob and all of that, it's very nice to see that can be laid in there, and depending on your discipline, some people will say, oh, I've got a soft feel on my horse. And I would say, maybe you do. And you'll know when you do if it's useful. Because a soft feel, a soft response in the jaw and the access to the top couple of without the engagement of the thoracic vertebrae and a bend behind the wither through the rib cage, and access to the coiling action of the pelvis and the sacrum, and the way he uses his whole hindquarters to be able to deliver a base of support for you, which is the ability to deliver either diagonal as needed as you change directions and as you accelerate and decelerate in your transitions. So this whole thing can be laid in on the ground with your groundwork, without a doubt. Okay, so the big culprit, the big thing that's in the way of all this so often is really the habit that people have of coming right up in here, right to the head, looking right in the eye, standing here, looking right up at the face, blocking the shoulders, punishing the shoulders, hitting the neck, doing all kinds of things before you ever really get a saddle on and get him comfortable with your understanding the signs and the feel of your riding agenda and your riding plans. Before that, he already feels like he's in battle all the time. Or many, not all, certainly not all. But what gets even more confusing is the horses that feel loved and forgiven and crowded and overindulged, and then when someone gets either frightened or a little bit hurt or worried that they're not doing the right thing, suddenly they firm up arbitrarily and start to do battle and look for submission. I'll get him to submit. No, show him who's boss, honey. That thing that's in the back of a whole generation of people who were taught to take over before they even knew what that meant, and before they even had the foggiest idea what to do. I remember my early days in Sweden and Norway looking at the beginning riding classes. These little tiny kids, first grade, they had their bodysuits on, they got their helmets, they got their whips, and they got their spurs. Helmet. Wow. So, these are horses that you couldn't, the ponies had to be delivered, brushed, tacked up. Here's the lead rope. Half the time the kids had to be put on there. They were, the horses weren't interested in any of it. But in any case, unfortunately, when that becomes the way that it's presented, that becomes the way you picture yourself in your new job as a horse lover. And the contradictions that are endemic in loving a horse that you beat up when you see it, or that you're a little bit afraid of as well. This is tough. This is really tough. Oh, I see Nina. Hey, Nina. We got to get together. What generation, says Jan here? I guess mine and beyond. Any generation that hasn't used horses for real work, like plowing, bringing out the wood out of a. You don't have to start worrying about anyone who in any generation hasn't needed a horse as a partner, because when you're really talking about partnership, you're not talking about ultimate domination, because if you're really on that track, you sure can't afford to be hanging by a foot from the stirrup at a gallop, can you? No, that isn't going to work. A partner will stop for you. One you've been dominating will just take you all the way down the road, and whatever's left of you will be in the barnyard when he gets there. And I'm not kidding about that, actually. I wish I were, but I'm not. So, Show 'em Who's Boss, honey, has a whole range of interpretations and applications, because really the horse is set up to get along, and when we become part of the herd of two, but we're constantly trying to impose and impress a force on him, don't be surprised when the reaction you get is more than you know what to do with. So I would just try to reflect your capacity to get along, and don't be too proud, and don't be too resistant to getting help. A lot of people ask me, who do I recommend in their area? Well, I can't tell you how many questions I get like this from all over the world. I'm not in your area, most of you. But what I would say, this is the easiest way for me to say it, is make a choice after you see someone work with a horse for a while. Don't make a snap decision. Go and watch someone work with 2 or 3 horses, and if that horse will tell you, that horse will show you whether they like that feel, that person's decisions and timing. The horse will tell you whether they feel okay. If they stop breathing when someone comes in, or they have their tail going left and right, or they're kicking and striking, not standing still to be tacked up, or they show obvious stress, eyes get wide, mouth starts to go, they start to salivate and get upset, maybe you might understand that your own horse would look that way too after a while, if you were thinking clearly. Or you could ask and say, is this horse always that way? How long have you had that horse in training? Maybe he just came in that morning. You don't want to blame a guy or a woman for the behavior of a horse they met 3 seconds ago. But I'm just saying, I think to just sort of mentally and emotionally check out and just leave it up to the hired hand to fix your problems with your horse is probably not a good way to own a horse. Probably not a good way to manage it. On the other hand, I know plenty of vets and farriers and body workers and trainers that really don't appreciate having a first-time horse owner who read one book that the horse didn't write come in and tell them how to do their job. So, just remember about that too, is that there's a spot here where you have a certain type of obligation to be, first and foremost, safe. First and foremost, don't get hurt. You got to pick the right horse, and then the support that you need to understand and manage the life in that animal, manage his choice of direction and speed and posture and behavior in your care, in your halter rope, when you're loose with him, in a pasture, in a stall, getting in and out of a horse trailer. These things can be very overwhelming to people that haven't done it before, so you want to get good help. And I would say that you're going to judge your vet. You're going to be a good judge of what is good help by watching someone. If someone doesn't let you watch them train, then forget it. This eye of mine is driving me mad. Sorry. It's just really tough to... Anyway, where was I? I really want to... Okay, this is it. Let me get back to the thing. Someone asked me last night, Why do you drift? Why can't we stay a little more on track? Well, I can say why, because this is not linear. Your horse isn't in a linear world, and just because he's on a schedule, just because you're on a schedule, just because Smart Pack delivers the supplements and you know what he's getting every day because you're paying for it, and you don't have him out there foraging around eating sticks and bark, just because everything's very regimented and orderly, and you chunk down your day in half-hour segments as a student, as a parent, as a horse trainer, as a school bus driver, this is not how horses are set up inside. So when I am thinking about what a horse needs from you, I'm really thinking, I'm coming from my thoughts inside that horse and inside me, inside that horse. I don't know if I can say it that way, but that is how it is. So what may appear to you to be my tangents and going off topic, and I've had a lot of people that no longer learn from me say, oh, well, it'd be a lot easier to learn from you if you don't go off topic. Tell the horse that. Yeah, tell the horse that when those 2-inch black flies come and bite him in the ass right on the back behind your saddle, and you going down the country lane working on your passage outside on a beautiful day, and suddenly you got one of these hummingbird-sized black flies that's going to change your ideas right there in a minute about what's off topic. So I'm just saying, you want to realize that they are not human beings, and the part of them that is accessible and available to you to remake and reshape and represent to you with human qualities is something to be careful. Excuse me for shaking my finger at you. I didn't mean to do that, but I guess that's the way I emphasize my points, and I don't mean to offend anybody. I'm glad people are candid with me about what they don't like. Don't shake your finger at me, Desmond. Okay, and tell your mother that too, by the way, when you see her next time, because I don't mean anything by it. What I do mean is that any horse, any time, at any place can present just about anything to you that may or may not be what you're ready for. So the thing that I want to emphasize more than anything is you want to always be ready to let go of this. That's how you do it. Just drop it. Doesn't matter if the horse is in the road. If you being attached to it means that you're also in the road. If you can't control the feet in a way that keeps you both out of the road, it's better that you let him go, because he probably isn't going to go play in the traffic. He's probably going to go near the nearest horse or go down to the nearest place that there's grass and wait for you to figure out how you're going to catch him. So I would just try to get a really seriously imparted from me to you with all my heart encouragement not to forsake or forget that common sense is something that horses have a lot of. Horses have a lot of common sense, and when you approach a horse with common sense the way you would maybe many other things in life, that's going to start to work for you. And I think if you don't get too hung up on what so-and-so thinks or what book said this that contradict what book said that, keep it simple. Keep it simple. There's a 4-beat walk, a 2-beat trot, a 3-beat canter, a 4-beat gallop, a 2-beat backup, and a saddle that you're planning on sitting in. Somehow getting all of that worked out on a horse that is not sore, not crooked, not upset at the sight of you, is doable. So if you chunk it down and start to think about simple, obvious things, not about what's going wrong, for God's sake, let's talk about what's going right. You know, you just turn on the news, you'll see what's going wrong all day long. Who needs more of that? There's so much going right with a horse. They are relieved when you... I miss you too, Jody. There is so much going right with horses when they are just not crowded here. Not crowded here. Right here. Don't hang out here, please. Go back here. Go back here. Sit up here. Get your lines and drive back here. Lunge. Look back here when you lunge. Send them around. Okay? Now, this is actually a really good thing I pulled this out, because look at this guy, for heaven's sakes. That horse got so much of people, he turned into one. Unbelievable. I don't think it'd be that good a ride. It just somehow looks awful. So here's the fun part right here. Ta-da! Now, when they're like this, golly, this is a lot of fun. Look at this one here. He's got everything going for him. Youth, flexibility, spindly quick legs, and the main thing, curiosity. Look at that. He's just, you can see that he went full speed and either found something to slip on or tried to stop. And he, look at this. Here he is, just doing his best. Look at this footfall. 3 feet in one line, left hip sticking out to the side. He probably fell over. But it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter, because if he's kept outside, listen, you're going to be on this one day. And that horse you're on better not have been standing in a stall for 2 weeks. Or you'll feel something, and it'll probably be the weight of that horse on your leg or your pelvis if you're not careful. And okay, now here, I said don't talk about what can go wrong, and listen to me. Sorry, but it's my job. It's my job to tell you to keep your horses flexible. And let's talk now about this troublesome topic of carrot stretches. Please don't do it. Please don't do it. There are better ways. I can just say that the downside of a carrot stretch is they get hooked on your food, not on you. They get hooked on your crowding and closeness. The minute you show up with a carrot, they become obnoxious. They become front end heavy. And not only that, you know the worst part of it? You run out of carrots, or if they don't like the carrots or they've got too much pesticide on them, you're out of luck. What I would do? Straight business. Leave the fly spray off. Less poison for you, less poison for them. More flexibility. See him? Okay, if you have a horse that can't put his nose right back there on his sheath or under his tail, if you have a horse that can't reach right back in there, male or female, your horse is too stiff. That means they've been in blankets with fly spray, or they've been in barns with music and fly spray and not enough room to move. Please let these horses move, and then you won't have the troubles you do. So much of the restraining equipment that is applied to these animals to promote flexibility actually just ensures that they're going to get heavy in front and start landing toe first. All right? Now, I'm going to try the third time here to get back to what I want to tell you. And I'm going to have to get my little, I think it's a standard bred. I don't know what he is. He's a carved wooden one. I had him yesterday here. Oh, here he is. Okay, now look. We'll use him. And I don't really know what to use for me. Here. Well, I don't have a fake little person. Yes, I do. Hold on. I do have a fake person. Just a minute. I don't know who he is. He's some sort of a outdoor guy. Okay, not Daniel Boone. He's too dressed up for that. But anyway, so much for my history. Look. Listen, I'm talking about leg aids now. Be patient, for crying out loud. Gee whiz. Okay. No, I'm not mad at you. Come on. It takes a while. I needed this guy to talk about leg aids. And you're going to say, well, how are you going to get leg aids out of this relationship? Because we're talking about groundwork. And this horse isn't ready to ride, neither is this guy. So if you're going to be lunging this horse in the direction that he's obviously going, I'm not going to say left or right because I can't tell who's left and right is going where. But you watch now. Here's this relationship. Bring it back here. Here's this relationship. Can you see? This horse is going around here. Okay? That way. So any information that you're giving this horse about what to do with his body in a lateral way is going to be directed by the person, in most cases, toward either where your leg would be, or at his hip, or at his shoulder. Okay, so in here on his body is where most people put impact from a flag, a whip, a popper, whether it's indirect feel or direct feel against the body. So that's going to be where the information comes that causes him to turn toward you, either and go around in a circle or turn toward you and face up, right? So then you sit up here. There are the legs, okay? You sit right up there. And now you're on that ride and you're going left, and you start in with this outside leg as you've been instructed in your riding class. And he wants to turn here. Because when you schooled him to the right, you did the same thing you did to the left. You want him to go left, you want him to go around you this way, and you come in here and tell him to take his hips to the outside, and he does, and that brings him around, and you're here. Are you following me? Okay? I'm not making any BS there. This is not BS. Maybe that's what you're saying. I'm telling you the truth as I understand it. So, I'm telling you here now, you cannot get on these horses as junior trainer or even experienced long-term groundwork rider without thinking clearly it through. Your colt has no idea about the meaning of your outside leg if you have not educated him that from the ground. This is where so many horses end up getting, within the first 2 years of training, from one trainer to another, to another, to another, trying to fix the fact that he bucks. So he doesn't buck. He just plain doesn't buck. He's taught to buck because if you begin with your nicely trained colt, you've gotten all your levels or all your certificates or all your awards or all your kudos from your trainer, or I said, hey, good job, or whoever it is saying whatever they say the way they ever say it. You feel like, okay, I did my groundwork, and by golly, this is it, man. I'm ready to go. This horse, just like everybody says, can do the hips both ways, take the shoulders both ways. He gets out of my ways. He leads up here. He'll back up here. Look at him backing here. Up, up, up. Now he's coming up, up, up. All right, so ready to ride. He can pack a saddle. I don't have all that stuff. I'm sorry, but we'll just pretend that I do. Here's my, okay, here he's got a saddle on right here. So here's your saddle, right? Saddled up. It's wooden. It's on there permanently. That poor guy, he's... Well, isn't this interesting? This is lovely. No stirrups on this saddle. He was from an era before they had them. That's the point, isn't it? Really? Come on. This is how the Indians first rode. No saddle, no stirrups either. So these Chinese horse, he didn't have any stirrups. No, they did not break off. No, this is actually making my point exactly. So you say, well, I'm going to put an inside leg on this colt, and I'm going to bend him around that leg and hold his hips on the circle. Good luck. I hope you can ride as fast as he can run, because if you hold him into that information, which means that you're going to ask him for a left rein, okay? I'm not going to use left and right. You're going to ask him for a rein right here. Okay? Second or third or fourth ride, maybe even on your first ride, because you're a good rider. But if you miss the connection between the lead rope and the rein and your groundwork and your position with your riding classes, you're going to pull on this rein here. You're going to set that leg right there and say, well, he'll turn around it. And then you're going to come in with this active leg on the outside, and he's going to say, what in the world? You're pulling me here, but I know from all the work you've done that this is the inside of this turn. So I'm going to take my hips here. That's going to be toward the mouth you're pulling. And suddenly you have no diagonal, and he speeds up and gets worried, and guess what happens? Doop, 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 doop. He becomes animated, concerned. He becomes the rocking horse that, without a diagonal and without this thing to hold him in place, buck you off right now. Boom. So there was a period back in the 90s, there was a period where the livestock contractors had a really nice string of well-bred quarter horses brought to them every week from the sale yards, when a lot of people down in Southern California were investing heavily in colts to get started at some of the more popular clinics that were there. And those clinics were going very, very well, and maybe still are, but they went real well because you can start a colt knowing nothing about one in 3 days. As long as you've got a guy on a saddle horse in a small enough pen to run all of you guys in a circle while you learn how to stay on a colt without a bridle or with a rope and halter. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of those horses turned out great. Some of them didn't. When you take a horse out of a group of other horses, so really what happens if you're colt starting like that, you're riding the herd, okay? So you're riding the herd, and you're going, and you're going, and you're going, and all the horses are going. Hi, Micah. Hey, LaSalle. I see a few names there. Anyway, a lot of people I don't know, but I sure see some old friends there, oh boy. So this is the point. This is really the point, is that when you keep horses together and they're moving together, it's much easier to ride as a group. It's much easier to ride in a group because you're going to just go with them like a school of fish. You just stay there, stay in the middle and go. You need help and support for that. Like a fence would be nice, somebody to keep the horses moving and determine the direction that you take and the speed that you're going to go. And that's a nice way to learn how to ride a colt if you haven't done it before. But here's the point. Hey, Anna. Here's the point. If you have that experience and come home and feel like you've just started a colt, many people did feel that way. And in one way, they had. They got there, they bought the horse, they paid for the class, they went through the whole organization. You listen to the DVDs or the CDs, and you buy the books, and you do your homework, and you're right up to here with it. You love it. And all that happens on a weekend or 2 weekends in a row, and then you're at the job, and you come home, and you want to show the wife or the husband what you learned over the weekend, and you take this horse out, and you got him at home by himself or with some old donkey sitting out in the backyard, and he lets you up there, and you do all your protocol. You brush him, you do everything. Saddle up, check your cinch, put your bridle on, get your rope and halter if you don't have a bridle. You never know. And then you liven him up. There's no one there pushing you around the pen with 5 or 6 or 7 other horses, or 10 or 15. I've seen them packed 22, packed in there like sardines, man. And then in comes somebody who knows what they're doing and running the show with a flag and a good saddle horse and let the games begin. Boy, it really gets interesting. But the horses don't buck. There's not much room to buck when you're galloping in a tight circle, stirrup to stirrup, nose to nose. But anyway, the idea that you're going to take a horse from that environment just because you had a supervised colt start in that, in those surroundings, that doesn't mean that in your country home or in your suburban environment or at your stable where you keep your quarter horse in the pipe corral and he hasn't been out in 6 weeks, you think you're going to get on in, or even 6 days. Okay, you get the point. They break in half. Call the ambulance. You take a couple of trips like that, and pretty quick the investment is questioned by whoever you share the mortgage with, and that's the end of that. So, I'm sorry, I'm laughing. It's not funny. A lot of people got hurt in that era doing such things, but here's the point. You can very easily imagine that the bucking horse industry started to get a huge new funnel of well-bred horses that were coming out of, Southern California for sure, and maybe Northern California too, and a lot of other places. But I watched that right here. It was just like a TV. 5 years later, their offspring were at the rodeos, and they sure were good-looking horses, smaller than some of that rough stock, and really well-built. I would have liked to have a lot of those horses I saw that went to those auctions. I would have liked to have a lot of horses I saw come out of those riding programs and go right to the sale yard and then get picked up by the breeders. And those were interesting times. I was glad I had a front row seat on a lot of that. It was a bigger deal than I realized, actually, in some ways. I was just felt like a minnow in a fast-moving pond, to be honest. I didn't really understand the gravity of the situation until it was long over. But I sure got some good lessons on many levels about myself, about people, about horses, about many, many, many things. So now we're going to get back to the leg aids, okay? So your leg aids, what are your leg aids? Your leg aids are, it's a tool through which you can communicate effectively or not at all, not effectively, and to sit there and just try to have your hands be, the hands and the reins be the thing that determines speed, direction, and the horse's posture is a real waste of your whole body, actually, because even if you don't use your leg aids intentionally, by the time you are consciously not using your legs to determine speed or position or direction, by position, I don't mean direction, I mean body carriage, self-carriage, how the horse is holding himself. So if you are, and I know many people that pride themselves in using no leg aid, I want you to think about using the leg aid, please, because your legs are on there, and if they are not being used because of you, the horse will certainly conclude that they're being used in spite of you, because nobody sits up there like a clothespin without moving. Your feet, for heaven's sakes, are on moving platforms, so every step that horse takes, if you don't have an absolutely perfect seat on a horse, you will be balancing on these stirrups, and your hands will be reflecting that imbalance. The movement in your legs is going to show up right in his mouth. So you want to develop a good seat by riding as this, whoever was riding this Chinese horse, I don't know how many thousand years ago, but certainly a long time ago, he had developed a seat, and I guess he broke his reins because they're not on there anymore, but there certainly are not stirrups that fell off of this. And all you have to do is look at the artwork of Rein or Remington or Russell, any of the people who were, Will James, some of the authors, just a whole, Zane Grey, any of the people who were illustrating back at the turn of the century, the late 19th century. Gosh, those horses, people were riding horses that were allowed to run. People were using balance. They had a place to go. They were actually looking where they were going and learning how a horse moved. I got it, Gwyneth, right there, the old cavalry style, bareback with no reins for 6 months. Sure, I mean, there was no way Attila the Hun was going to organize. He had 10,000 people who had 10 horses each, and they didn't have 3 years of training before they went out and started butchering around the countryside, that's for sure. In fact, I have read in more than one place that if you picked up a rein in battle, they just chopped your head off and took your horses. I don't know if it's true. I wasn't there. But it certainly does, hey Amy, it certainly does seem logical that if the horse's feet are going to be your feet, you better learn how to direct them with something other than a rein, because what are you going to do with your reins when you need to take your rifle or your bow and arrow or your sword and your shield and all that other stuff? These guys were having fist fights on horseback. You know, come on. Riding isn't today what it was then, because the goal of riding today is either sport or recreation, and there's no more fun you can have. I love jumping. I love riding in the woods. I like having races. I used to race the train in Housatonic. It went down by Van Duzenville. I used to go down there with my little gelding and run down the tracks next to the train, for heaven's sakes. It's fun to ride. It's fun to go on adventures. It's fun to get up in the mountains. It's fun to do a lot of things. And there's certainly thousands and thousands of people today, fortunately, still enjoying horses in a good way. But how you stay on there is the point. And again, it gets right back to not getting hurt, not scaring the horse, not getting upset in a way that gives the horse control of you, because you've just relinquished control of yourself to the fear. And if you're riding afraid, I just want to say, you're riding afraid. Your horse knows it. You cannot hide anything from a horse. You can't. It's just not possible to pull the wool over their eyes. It is possible to confuse them by changing your hairspray, not your hair color, your hairspray, your toothpaste, your cologne, all that stuff that we force them to breathe. If you really want to do your horse a favor, I'll just get right down to the basics of it. It doesn't even matter what your leg aids are. If he doesn't like how you smell and you sit up there, he'll have a hard time listening to your legs. So you just want to make sure that the main thing is you feel good about you when you're up there. And if you've got a lot of insecurity, or you've had a bad day, for example, you're having a fight with your boyfriend or your wife or your boss, just don't get on. Do something else. Go clean feet. Go clean the stall more. Go do something different. This is not okay to think that they are just there when you need them in some amazing, deep, soulful, supportive, emotional backup way, and then the minute you're, when you need them, and then the next thing you know, you're just off rocking along and you've got yourself back together again, and they're just sort of just an appendage, some sort of a thing to flaunt or to own. That's one thing I have to say in my own relationship with horses. I don't consider them mine. The bills have been mine for years, lifetimes full of bills. I don't consider them mine, and I'm going to explain why. You can't own a soul. You really can't own another soul. You can't own your partner. You can't own your child. You can't own your lover. You can't own your parents. This thing where identity gets tied up in gripping on, it's really important to remember before I start talking to you about do you kick them on the left or do you kick them on the right. It is really, really important to understand that it's not about the mechanics. It's about your relationship to you that you bring to that horse, because you got to have the understanding that he is packing you on his back. He's packing you on his back. It's an intimate situation for him or her. So if you bring up there a lot of clutter and clatter, inner chatter, clatter in your mind, clutter in your mind, your desk is full, your mind is full, there's noise in your head, you're upset on any level. If you need your horse for comfort and support, go for it. Just plain go for it. Just go for it. Love on him. Cry on his shoulder. Take him for a walk. Sit down. Bring your Kleenex. Do the whole thing. I've done it, for heaven's sakes. Couldn't talk about it this way if I hadn't. But the point is, don't get up there and ask him to do something for you like perform in a mechanical way where you can't really be there for him. He has to be able to follow clear instructions about what to do with his feet, for heaven's sakes. And if you're in a whirlwind of hurt or a whirlwind of confusion, or you're worrying about the timing on your colt starting, I'm going to tell you a story in a minute about a real heartbreaker of a horse I worked 6 years to train. It ended up in a big mess. I was with that horse right from the beginning, and he just was a zero at the end. And it was just... Anyway, there's a time when you lean on something other than your horse. There's a time when you lean on nothing. There's a time when you get a journal. There's a time when you write about it. There's a time when you shut your mouth and don't tell the whole world about everything. There's a time when you just turn in and take responsibility for the next moment. Maybe that's all you can do, the next moment. How do I feel? What am I going to do with it? Do I unload this on this horse because people are watching? Do I feel like crap because I didn't just win? I mean, look, I'm bringing this up for real reasons, because people who haven't worked this stuff out are starting horses today, alone in the backyard. They're holding their shingle out, trying to get hired to start your horse today. And many of them really have the capacity to be good with horses, but they haven't done their work. And you can get a lot done with a horse and have a lot of fun and have a really good life and a really productive, even if you haven't done your work, whatever it is, your personal stuff. But there will be a horse, if you get good at selling yourself and marketing yourself and get in the mainstream, and you can kind of get a horse half broke, and you can get somebody on there that doesn't know too much, but you get a a clientele that is primarily overweight, out of shape, first-time dreamer horse owners with the money to bankroll the dream, having had a life of sacrifice, either for a boss, a family, raised the kids, got them through college. Now the time for me. And what have they got? They got a 3-year-old that somebody sold them. Really. They got a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old colt or a well-bred so-and-so just imported with 6 weeks of training coming right out of the depths of Germany, where all of these fancy, beautiful, well-bred 17-hand horses that are 3 years old come exploding off those plains looking for who? The guy that used to feed them. Looking for what? The group of colts they used to run with. And what have they got? They got 6 weeks in quarantine. And then they got you. And a trainer that may or may not know exactly what to do with all that. And I've seen this for years. And I'm worried because the trend is toward more of it. The trend is toward more of it. And the trend is toward a lot of things that have to do with giving the horse less space, richer food, more drugs. It was a time when you really wanted to learn something from a guy, you go to the vet. The vets were the ones who were doing the work without sedation. They were getting huge jobs done with who is supposed to learn what from whom. Eve Deering, who is supposed to learn what from whom? I don't know. I think you learn, when you're open, you learn from the horse, and you learn from whoever you can find that knows more, that can help you keep you safe and answer questions in a way that makes sense to you. I don't know if that's what you meant. I'm certainly not, trying to knock anybody's efforts. But if you could see, from my perspective, what has happened to this industry and what has happened to the pressure that is on most horses today to come through for beginning riders who are sincere and heartfelt and worth every bit of a good ride in a safe horse. But a lot of the times they're not being either drawn to those horses or those horses aren't made available to them. This is tough stuff. It's really tough. And it's tough because once you get afraid of a horse, it's hard to get over it. It's hard to get over it. So when you have your leg aids to consider in the middle of all this other stuff that you may or may not want to talk about or consider ever again, that's up to you. I bring it up because I understand the role of all this unspoken stuff between trainers and students and families and horse owners, and limited amounts of money getting siphoned off to horses when the kid needs braces or a tutor or a tree landed on the garage. It's a tough, tough thing for families, really tough to make those decisions about where to put limited money when you got a horse lover in the family. And I know some of you know this. So you're sitting up there and you're thinking, okay, I want to go left. Leslie has talked about, and I've read about, and other people say, open the door at the shoulder. Okay, so you have the opportunity to open the door at the shoulder. You can tip your toe out a little bit, but if you have a spur on and it goes into his rib cage, that's another message. If you don't have someone helping you, you can't learn how to ride a horse just listening to me. Please don't ever think that. I don't think that, and I wouldn't advise it. But the things that I'm trying to suggest to you is that if the horse has too much confinement with 2 legs, or too little information from 2 legs, or inaccurate information from 2 legs, and only his mouth to go on, eventually he will make the decisions for you. Because the reins for many horses in the hands of many people mean stop, go, left, right, back up, collect, half halt, bad boy, I've lost my balance. That's a lot of things for reins to mean in the mouth of a 3-year-old horse that may never have had a bridle on with someone on his back before. So I think the real thing that I want to impress upon you is that whether you're going to use an inside leg to ask a hip to step away, or you're going to use that same leg to open a toe with a corresponding line of sight change and posture change as you open a rein in the direction and you release a little rein on the outside of his neck. What is your other leg doing? You know, when you talk about turning a horse, I think the first thing, before you get too confused about which leg does what, you've got to decide, we're going to talk about this again, as I've mentioned, from the horse's point of view. You have to ask, is this left turn I'm making and planning to make, is it going to be one where I take the horse in a circle or an arc with both ends reaching equally? Is he going to step with this hoof just as much as he steps to the outside with his inside hind? Will he take his right outside leg across the same amount that he steps his inside leg to the outside of the circle? If you don't have the horse reaching equally with both ends and you're just dragging him around by the mouth, that's a very different kind of circle and a very different kind of result than if you've actually assigned in your own mind a job for your legs to do as you change and as you shift the function of your leading rein and your supporting rein. Both reins have both jobs depending on where you're tipping the nose and where you're wanting to go. You switch jobs, your hands switch functions as the direction you're riding in changes. And that is also true on the ground. But if you're going to be teaching a horse to understand an outside leg when you get on him, he's got to understand the feel of an outside leg from the way you handle your rope on the ground. And this is what I'm talking about. So here I'm going to show you again. A lot of you have come on board here. Quite a few people have just showed up. I see this. And I'm happy. Hey, Carrie, I haven't seen you in a long time. My high school buddy. So here we have a left rein. This is your lead rope now, okay? We're on the ground. Never mind the saddle. You have this rein coming in the shoulder groove right here off the horse's mouth. You cross over the withers, and you're going to be behind this horse, or maybe back here on the side here. You could be anywhere. You can be on the left side, the right side. You can be over here, right behind him. But he can feel your rein. That's you. This represents you. It's on his left shoulder. There's your leg, right in the leg position. So here you've got him. He's going to be thinking about operating between that outside or inside rein and that outside or inside leg. What makes it outside or inside? It depends on which way he's going. But really, a well-trained horse, and the people that I work with, the girls, the women, and the men that I am interested in helping and that find their way to me, you learn how to go in any direction you want with one line that's doing any job it needs to. You don't have to run up and change a hook or change a bit or put some other thing on there. If you've got a rein that's going right down that shoulder groove, you go across that back and bring that same line. I said a rein, I meant a lead rope or a lunge line. And mind's the quality of the rope you use too, by the way. Don't want some thing that just flies around. It has to have some, you got to be able to have a rope that will carry a feel and carry instructions to that horse carefully. So you want to have that line go down that rope. Hey, Brittany, you know what I'm talking about. I see you there. So you want to have that line go across that shoulder groove, down behind the base of the neck, across the back, and down where your leg would be. So let's say you're on the right side of that horse, and you've actually got, visually to your hand, he's going around to the right, and the piece of line you have is going down the left side of his neck with a loop in it. Okay? So it's coming across his back, right in the position where your right leg would be as he's going by. All right, so you want to teach him how to yield from that to his left, and also how to come and bring his hip to you. How to bring a horse's hip to you. How do you do that? You do like I'm telling you. You use that long line and you practice until he understands the opening and closing function of one piece of rope as it serves in the shoulder groove as his rein, and as across his rib cage coming down, draped across there, back to your hand. You need about a 25 rope for that foot rope. So you're going to have this in this way, where you release that line on the inside. Okay, your horse is going to the right. You got a 25 or 30 foot rope coming out. He's got an outside rein. He's turned to you. So instead of being sitting up there and opening that toe in your direction to the right, you lift that line. Maybe your rope gets too tight. Maybe he starts turning left. Let him do it. What are you going to do? So you take that rope over his rump, and suddenly he's made that corner, and now he's going to your left. You got to experiment. And I think one of the best advice I could give you about understanding the lead rope to rein connection and how to start working the refinement and the finesse of a responsible, accountable leg aid. Let's not worry about what this horse can do for us. Really, I mean, let's not do that. Let's not worry about what that horse can do for us. Let's worry about what we can do for him so that he has absolute sureness. This is what's missing in horse training and horse riding so much of the time, is the sureness about what's happening underneath you, the sureness about what that horse thought you meant by what you did. And one of the things that's so important, I believe, about finding that spot where that sureness actually is established, is that it has to be established between you and yourself before it can be established between you and the horse. He's plenty sure about leaving if he has to, and he's also plenty sure about his curiosity and his interest. And somewhere between the flight response, I don't get it, I'm leaving, I'm upset, I'm afraid, you're too much, it hurt, any reason for leaving, but between that, there's also a tremendous biologic imperative. He's born with the desire to understand his environment. What was that? Hey, I just saw that. I wonder what that was. So there's this huge, I've seen horses go out. In fact, where was I? Just recently, I was at a place where, it was right up in New Hampshire, where 3 horses just every day go out and look at the scenery. And they watch the hawks at my friend Rick's place. They watch the hawks, and they stand there. Hey, Karen. They stand there watching the hawks, watching the smoke that starts to come up in the other end of town for hours. For hours. And then when the dog comes out, or the cat comes out, or the skunks come out, they go and they check those out at closer range. They really want to know. They really, really want to know what's going on. And that's why when you restrict lateral motion, they come and look around at your foot because they've been taught carrot stretches, or they've been rewarded for coming to your hand for a treat, and you're in the saddle and they look around to see what your hand could be doing, or they're trying to follow. They see their eye is here and they see you open your hand with a leading rein. They see you open your toe, and a young horse will say, oh, what's that? Maybe someone was doing carrot stretches, or he was hand-fed by your mother-in-law. Who knows? Don't kick him in his mouth, please. Don't kick him in his mouth for saying, what are you doing back there? That is your friend. And no better than you would look, hanging by one foot at a gallop, going through town, you better know that can happen. And it's really not worth it. You don't want to get cocky up there. Don't let your worry or your lack of sureness turn into bravado that can really scare your horse, It can happen. It can really happen fast. And, hey, Peg, what did John Burroughs just show up at this thing here? Looks like, holy cow. Good to see all of you. I don't see too well from here. So what we want to try to do is to find that sweet spot, that happy medium between the goals that you have and the goals that you have set for yourself, and the efforts that you're making to reach them with the best help you can find, and your fear of not reaching those goals, and don't forget your fear of reaching them. And the reason I say that is that because Buck told me one of the most important things I ever heard in my life, and it changed the way I teach, changed the way I continued learning from him, because he stopped teaching me after that. I am not afraid to say it. It was one of the best gifts he ever gave me. And what he had given me was a couple of compliments back to back about the way I was riding a stud one evening that was kind of a slippery character. Hard to find where that stud connected the feet with your hands, with your mind, with his own feet. And it was just not an easy horse to figure out all of a sudden. Buck gave me a compliment about how I did. And instead of saying, thanks, Buck, because he had just gotten off the horse a minute before that, actually. And that was in 1994 at the Nevada Horsemen's Arena at about midnight. And we were out there in the lights, and there were still people working with cattle and still people working horses and partying on. Boy, those were some fun times. And I stepped off that horse and handed the horse back, and he said that was a pretty good ride, considering. And I knew exactly what he meant, because it was a difficult ride. And I didn't say thank you, and I didn't let it in. I just said, well, I made some comment like, I could have done better, or, you know, I really should have done better, or you should have seen what I did over there. You know, yeah, I wanted to make sure he knew that I didn't think that much of myself. Well, why would you do that? He said, Leslie, you're so hard on yourself, you're hard on me. And he never gave me really clear, direct, supportive input again, because he had had about 4 or 5 years of me just pushing it back. I don't understand what this means. I'm not... Oh, you're not getting the sound. Maybe I'm not speaking loudly enough. Maybe turn your phone up. I don't know. Can you guys hear me? Am I not speaking well enough? Can someone tell me if this is loud enough? It must be the volume on a specific device, I guess. Anyway, I'm not seeing any feedback on that, so I don't know what to say there. But I want to share with you that, because some of my students have learned how to say, thanks, Leslie. Thanks for noticing. Yes, because I can't help you with your dreams. I cannot help you with your dreams. If your dreams are up here and you don't let in my feedback, my positive feedback, down here at the lower levels on your way up the ladder to your dreams, if you don't let me know that you hear me, if you don't let me know you hear me, and you don't let me know that you get it, why would I start introducing more challenging, more complicated, more direct route to your goal information if you keep pushing the compliments back down my throat? Got it? That was a hard lesson, Buck. Good lesson. Really good lesson. And I got a lot of good lessons from all of those guys back then. All of them. And I wish I had been able to spend more time, for example, with people who were farther away. Mike Bridges has some good things to offer to people. I was never around where I was too often. Harry Whitney has done some very nice things for people that I know. And Deb Bennett has provided us all with really incredible information that we were amazingly getting along without somehow, not as well as we got along with it after the fact. But these are all really, really important points of humility and also self-love. There has to be a balance there, because why on earth should a horse want you up there if you don't like yourself? He's going to feel that. He's going to feel that. So when I talk about doing your work, it's not just the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of training. It's not just hoping that the right person says, atta boy, atta girl, good job, you did it. Check that off, good, done, put to bed. No, it's a process. It's a process. And that process is to wake up every day and to feel glad that you're alive and you've got a horse to go out to. And I will say that I'm going to talk a little bit more for a couple of you who I know really want to get this leg aid thing figured out. Buck used to say, I mention him a couple of times now because he had some fun things that he said. He said, you can teach your horse to lie down when you whistle Dixie if you want. What he meant was you don't have to pick up a foot. You don't have to do all kinds of things. You don't have to do all kinds of things to build in a routine or impress the crowd. You can just get out there and whistle and have the horse drop dead if you want to put on a show. The point is, there is no right and wrong with this. I've seen some really beautiful rides with people who didn't use their feet. They just had very, very good quiet seat and very good hands. I've seen some excellent rides with people who really actually looked pretty bad on a horse, and they were flopping all over the place. A horse knew exactly what was expected because they were consistent. You see, you can get that horse to actually do whatever you want as long as you don't keep changing the rules. And that's just like running a family or running a business or running your own life. If you keep changing the terms without checking back to everybody on the end, and that everybody could just be you and the many parts of yourself that are trying to function in the community, at church, at work, with your family, in the barn, with your best friend, with your exes, with your high school classmates, with people you're going to meet next week. You got to keep track of where you are with you and all of that for it to have any type of result that is not only recognizable, but graspable, shapeable, and growable. And that's the same as is with a horse. This is a process. And a horse is probably put here for our use and for our enjoyment as much or more than any other horse, because, look, they built the whole place. For heaven's sakes, they built the whole place, right? You've got to be consistent so they know what to expect. They know what to expect, and whether you're doing it right or wrong. I want to tell you about an experience I had. Just a minute, I got to get some water here. Excuse me. I remember walking into a stud barn one time down in Portugal, and there were 80 stallions in one room. It was beautiful, big cobblestone floors, wide walkways. Some of them were made of concrete, but the older part was marble walkways and cobblestone and hand-hewn, beautiful interior of the older part of this barn. And the horses were well fed, they were well behaved, they were clean. The place was immaculate. But when that door opened and we went in, you could have heard a pin drop. You could have heard a pin drop. They stopped chewing. They stopped drinking. They stopped everything. They were quiet. They stopped moving. If they were going to the bathroom, and some of them were actually right when we went in there. I remember watching a gelding. Wasn't a gelding, he was a stallion. I remember him kind of coming back up from that event very, very quietly. Not as if they were just 80 studs in these great, luxurious box stalls. They were cautious, not wanting to be noticed. Someone could say, the girl with me said, "You think they're afraid?" And I had to give that some thought. It would have been easy to give a quick yes, but I gave a quick thought to it instead. I know they weren't afraid. What they were was sure. They were sure what was going to happen if they stepped out of line. Someone would say a well-trained child would be the same. A well-trained dog. If you don't do that, you know what I'm going to do. If you don't do that, you know what's coming. There's certainly a lot to be said for that within reason. You just have to get it to the point where it doesn't cramp the heart and the mind too hard. Because when you shut the mind off and the mind and the heart get separated, that gets dangerous in a person. And it gets dangerous in a horse too, because a horse does have heart. They do have feel. They do have a sense. They're decision-making, rational beings. And anyone who's ever had their life saved by one, and that could be just in a split minute of making the right decision for both of you, you know that they're with you. It's really, really important not to wreck that by being too hard. But the sureness is the same that I'm talking about, that I saw there in Portugal that day. I rode several horses. They didn't feel afraid to me. They did everything I wanted them to. They weren't afraid of me, and when I saw them in action with the grooms and the trainers, they weren't afraid of them either. But they were sure about the limit. They were sure of their job. The same way you would want a child to be sure on one lesson, for example, about not running in the road, about not putting a hairpin in an electrical outlet. You need firmness to get those things right, right? You need firmness. the discipline that is involved in creating an accountable horse, or a young child that's accountable to the family and later to the community and to himself or herself throughout life. That's a process where you have to balance kindness with firmness. There's an appropriate firmness at all levels of horse training, and also with ourselves. We have to be firm with ourselves sometimes, right? If we weren't firm with ourselves, what kind of chaos would we have in our lives? I know my life would be 3 sheets to the wind. I'd look like Mary Poppins. Yeah! So you have to hang on to something that is going to keep you on that track. And when you're working with, fortunately, most of us can choose the track that we want to be on. We can choose the course of events, the education we want, the spouse we want. Most of you who are listening to me now, I think, have had the blessing and the luxury of those choices given to you, or fought for you. We have earned them, won them, we've found them, we're holding on to them, however it wants to be said. But whatever it is, as you find people to help you with your goals and dreams, it's really important, as you find people to help you and as you impart discipline and the self-esteem and the respect. Horses have self-esteem too. Horses have self-respect too. So do dogs. You want to keep that self feeling good enough that they have pride in learning something new. They have pride in doing well for you. And I don't know, I just can't wait for the day that I can bust out with this film. I got 70 terabytes of film, you guys. It's cataloged, organized. I've started editing it, but boy, is it a project. It's a lot, and I've got film. Actually, it reminds me of there was a little colt up there in the mountains. It must have been 2015. I was just getting a halter on a colt that wasn't really good to catch up in the mountains one day in Southern California. And after that little fella realized what I wanted, I swear he was proud. He was thrilled to think that he knew what I wanted. And when you set it up right, and you set it up so that your agenda becomes their plan, that starts to be a working partnership. Just like having your kid learn how to tie his shoes and dress himself. It's really what your plan is. But when he thinks it's his idea, or she thinks it's her idea, to let the dog out and clean up the mess that the younger kid just made, then you're really on your way. You're really getting somewhere with that. And I think that horses are really, really possible to train in the same way, and to include as an extension of your plans, an extension of your being. Let them be your legs. Let them take you. And to do that, that means that your own legs need to be accountable to the footfall. Okay? So if you don't know where the feet are, that would be the place to start before you start worrying about leg aids. You need to know when a hoof is on the ground, when it is being lifted up, when it is to the point where it's pushing off, when the whole rest of the body organizes with the weight up and back so that that leg can reach, and then it lands, hopefully heel first, and then it passes your combined weight across the frog and the quarters and the sole and the toe, and you start that process over and over again before you start worrying too much about leg aids in your attempt to become a technically proficient rider and an accurate rider with well integrated hand and leg aids working together. You got to know where the feet are and what the feet feel like at each gait, and what that really should hopefully steer you toward would be a compassionate coach or a friend who can lend you a horse. One of the things that I've found out is that many people, see you, Gwen, many people don't have the money to bankroll the private lesson routines. So go find someone who will lend you a horse. Go find someone who rides better than you do and see if they'll let you hang out and watch. These things take time. I'm going to probably think about going. I think I've used up a lot of time here, and it's been fun. We're not at the end of the journey together, I hope. But I've just decided to try to put a few more things up for you to watch on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. Let me let you know about that. I think you just go to Leslie Desmond YouTube or youtube.com Leslie Desmond. If you want to review and get a little deeper into some of the things that we've talked about, the audiobook is 102 tracks on 10 CDs, and that is available on my website. It's also available through Desmond Outfitter at Facebook. So these are things that you can get sent to you in the mail, or you can order online. I know some of you have any of you who are listening now, have any of you heard the audiobook or had the opportunity to listen to those things and try them out? I built that in 2006 with help from my friend Rika and her father Ingo in Germany. And what a, oh, thanks, Cody. Yeah, I guess you have. Yeah, and you're welcome, Tina. No, it's my pleasure to pitch in. That's all I'm doing is pitching in. There are plenty of professionals out there that can help you. There are people that are really better organized, and they've got staffs and spouses and well, thank you, Cody. You've got a lot of people out there have a little bit of a better support network to put out a slicker product. Right now, I'm just sitting here at home on a couple of days before I get up and go again, and I just felt inspired to share some things with you. I've got a lot more where that came from, but perhaps this is a big enough piece of the pie for the moment. What I'm working on right now is to share the diagrams that come out of a year that I spent working with horses in Livermore, California in 2012 and part of 2013. I don't bother forwarding those pictures yet. Don't bother forwarding those pictures yet to anybody, because I'd really like to finish the comments on those. Just to look at them alone or possibly think that somebody would take instruction from them would be a little scary for me. So hold off before you forward that. And then I have another photo collection that I'm going to send you that is more about the horses that are out of alignment and what to do to get them into alignment. I might say thanks. Okay, you guys, thanks a lot for letting me know about this and that you've listened to some of those tracks. I put my heart and soul into that one, I can tell you. And I had some excellent help from Ingo and Rika and Topo and some other people doing it. And that was really I'm trying to put a comparable project together, but I seem to be traveling a little bit too much to manage it at the moment, as I have been trying to get this film project going for 10 years. All I've got right now is a lot of good film and a lot of better quality film than I had 10 years ago. Actually, really good quality film. I got some good cameras. I've got some good people, really dedicated people and great horses. So eventually it'll happen. Thanks, Claudia. I see you guys are all over today from a lot of places, and I'm very, very grateful. Very grateful that you're interested in that. Some of this could be useful to you. Hi, Cynthia. So I'm gonna sign off now, and I don't expect to come back to you except perhaps sporadically. I'll give you a little notice if I feel like there's something on my agenda or your agenda. Ask me if you want help. Let's say this. Why don't you ask me if you want help? You want me to do another one of these? Why don't you do that? Wouldn't that be the best way? Because I'll tell you something that Bill Dorrance told me. It took several. That's what I should do. I should tell you about the process of getting Bill going on writing that book. Boy, that was something. I'll just tell you one thing before we quit, and then we'll review. Maybe I'll resume and do a few things this summer and just talk about Bill and the things I learned from him. Would that be fun? If you guys would enjoy that, it would be a pleasure. I would really like to offer you some of those anecdotes, those vignettes from my memories of him and my notes. Got a lot of unpublished material from my years with Bill, both film and audio and written notes and photographs. So if that would be interesting, I would absolutely be my pleasure. And Tori, actually, you met Bill, so he really thought a lot of you in that try you had. So I will go ahead and for sure start to focus on that probably over the summer, because I'm not going to be able to. It's going to be too hot to do much else except talk about Bill. I don't thrive in the heat, but I'm going to do my best. Here's what I wanted to tell you, that we sat down to write the book a number of times because it was certainly on his mind, and I would sit down at the kitchen table there, and big kitchen table. You could fit 12 people there, a big old oak oval table in there. And then I said, well, Bill, are we going to write our book today? We'd say that about breakfast. Oh yeah, I think so, we'd say, and then I'd get ready and he'd do the dishes, and they seemed to take a long time to get those dishes done somehow. And so then I'd say, well, are you ready? And I'd have my notebook out. I had a little tape recorder. And he said, okay, I'll keep going. So then Bill said, hey, Russ. And then Bill said, well, why don't we get some lunch? And I said, well, we just cleaned up from breakfast. Can't we just write this a little bit? Let's get an outline. And he said, well, what would that involve? And I said, well, an outline would be kind of the pattern, the track that we're going to take to write our book. We're going to want to map out how we go with this book. We can't just sit down and write a book without a plan. He said, oh yeah, that'll be a good idea. We'll do that. And so I said, all right, well, what's the title? Do we want to start with a title or with the first ideas? And he said, well, I rather think where we're writing about horses, we should just talk about that. And I said, okay, I'm ready. And then he just sat there for quite a long time. And then I said, well, do you have any ideas you want to share? Is there something we could get started with right there? And he said, yeah, I rather think so. He said, well, where you haven't written a book before, you wouldn't really know how to get started without some questions. And I said, okay, I understand that. So I asked him, I said, well, what does someone need to know? We've all started horses, we've all been involved with horses, but if we're going to put it down on a piece of paper, what should we say? Well, I'm not going to tell you how long it took to get that discussion going. It took days, it took weeks. We always had to go do something else. Well, let's go to the saddle room. Well, let's go. I think I better go clean the fat off that hide. Oh, he postponed, as you cannot imagine. I was just tearing my hair out. And then one day I said, but Bill, I think we're really kind of running out of time on getting started on our book, you know. And he said, yeah, he said, we better get started. And this is weeks now. I mean, several. So I said, well, I'll just ask you that original question, Bill. What's the first thing we should do if we're going to be starting a horse? And he looked up and he said, well, however that horse is how that fella has to be. I said, you want me to write that down? He said, yeah, I think you better. So I did. However that horse is how that fella has to be. That was the first line of the book. And I thought to myself, well, that's absolutely accurate. And I said, so what would we write? What are you thinking now? He said, well, that's about it. And I said, Bill, that's the shortest book in the whole world. That can't have that book like that. That's too short of a book. And anyway, that was how we got started. I will say it was a long time leaving the station before we got going. Anyway, the rest of the story is a book in itself. So that's what we started with. However that horse is how that fella has to be. And I think some of you will understand what he meant by that. Some of you may not. But anyway, eventually, we got it worked out. It took 5 years. And 5 years, and I might add 11 rewrites. It was a lot of writing on that book. And a lot of mistakes, and we got up to where he wanted 2,100 pictures in there. And we had many, many, many more than that to pick from. And he picked out, he picked out 2,100 pictures. And just at the point where I realized, working with Grace Lambert and her husband Steve, that this was insane. This was absolutely insane. You don't have any 2,100 pictures. I couldn't possibly do it. But honestly, if you'd been sitting there next to me, you wouldn't have told Bill no either. I don't think so. You couldn't tell anyone with that much knowledge who was just starting to talk. You couldn't say no to one picture. You had to try to see what he saw in that picture. And I still have all the boxes of the originals right here in this room. I have all the boxes and all the negatives right here of the whole thing. And that is what kept me in it, because it isn't what he said that helped me understand how to do what I am trying to show you today and talk about today. It isn't what he said. It's the pictures that he picked out. We'll take that one, not that one. We'll take that one, not that one. What did I know? There were 2,100 of them is what I knew, and we had to figure out how to make that book. So that book is not small, and the pictures is 750 pictures. We had to, in the end, eliminate 1,400. And before we got to that point, he said, I don't think we should make our book. This is in, don't tell me this too often, Bill. Not after we're halfway through 1998. That was not something so funny to hear right then. He said, I think we should make a movie. He said, because all these pictures add up to a movie. That's what. I'll leave you with that. He was something else. He was really something else. I'll come back to you with some Bill stories. And I'll also come back to you with some of the answers to your question. I think some of you might not feel like you got enough out of this. You can write to me at ridewell@lesliedesmond.com. My address is Post Office Box 234, Lee, Massachusetts, 01238. I'm mentioning that because I'm getting a lot of mail returned, and a lot of people are not. Some of you were kind enough to send me cards at Christmas, and it's just too bad. Yes, I'll tell you. Thank you, Nikki. It's too bad that your Christmas cards got returned. I'm sorry. P.O. Box 234, Lee, Massachusetts, 01238. Thank you so much for your time this evening. By the time I'm on here again, I think my eyes will be fixed up. Temporary situation. I'm sorry. Those of you who don't know me probably think I've got something in my eyes or that there's pain. There's not. I answered some email about that last night. I'm in no pain. Just an old injury raising its head. So we're going to fix that up, and I'll be back in business. Yes, there are right-tied halters available, and that is one question that I wanted to answer. One of you asked last night, why bother with a right-tied halter? Someone else asked, should I use a right-tied halter? I don't like the word should, so I won't say you should. Let's just say it will be helpful to a horse who is approached on both sides of his body to understand what you mean when you turn him both ways when you're on his back, because he will see you up close and up front, close and personal, when you ask him to turn his head and neck to the right so that his face comes into your opening hand. You reach down and you pull your hand out behind his right eye, and you're pulling his hand out toward an active leg and an active hand. If he's never seen you over there and you're getting on him for the first time with your active hand and your active leg in the right eye, that might be the last ride you have for a while, and it might be a very sudden dismount on his terms. So I think if you can just get your horse balanced. The other thing is that horses handled on both sides, quite frankly, can square up like the ones I showed you on that photo shoot there that I loaded this morning. I loaded photos of my horses that are, one of them is 8 and the two of them are in their 20s, and when they are squared up, they don't load the forehand too much, and they don't, their hips are underneath them and available, and they are standing with a leg at each corner pretty much no matter what they're doing. So it's important to recognize when your socialization habits have created horses that are front end heavy or dominant on the left shoulder because it is used too often for crowding and for self-defense. Oh, thank you, Tori. Check out Desmond Outfitter at Facebook for halters. Yes, they're all there, and I have a ton of them. I just had a bunch more made, and I also have ropes that carry. They're blue, I'm sorry. They're turquoise ropes. I'm sorry they're such a color, but that's the color they are. And they really are a superior rope in terms of, they're a superior rope in terms of the sensitivity that they can carry, the feel and meaning they can carry without having to be particularly active. They also are very easy to put still. In a moment, you can take the life out of yourself and out of that rope, and it is still and not interfering or giving. Actually, Nikki, it's horse gear, H-O-R-S-E, horse gear at lesliedesmond.com for halters. You could send me ridewell at lesliedesmond.com is what I will read to answer questions and to get ideas that if you have suggestions for other audio format presentations on Facebook or later on my website when I finish it, then we can, I really would like to reflect to you the things that are going to be meaningful as we go forward together. I'm going to let you all go now. There are many, many things for all of you to do with your horses, I know. And thanks, Nick. Horse gear at lesliedesmond.com for halters and ropes. And then there are, simple, huh? Books at lesliedesmond.com for books and audiobooks. I have it split up like that because I get so many emails that I had to do that so that I didn't miss the point of your communication. It got too crowded the other way. So I apologize for any misunderstanding in how to connect with me. The best way to reach me is through these emails or on Facebook. And thank you. And go have fun with your horses. Those of you that want a little bit of extra time or help, or you're worried that I didn't have time to answer your question. One question I got last night, what do you do about a wind-swept horse? I don't even know what it means. And if you're on there, or anybody on there, what does it mean, a wind-swept horse? It's just not a term that regionally I've heard. Maybe it goes by another name around here. Does anybody know? Wind-swept? Thanks, Nikki. Nobody? Cody, you know what that means? Wind-swept? Maria? Nikki, what is that, wind-swept? Anyway, I will talk to all of you later. It's been great. And I hope I can get a set of instructional DVDs out to you before I'm too old to do it. All right. It may, Nikki, I don't know. Oh, here. This is from Tori. It's a foal that is born crooked because of the way it was in the womb. Okay. Okay, in answer to that question, yeah, I know some vets that specialize in that, so whoever was asking about that before, I'll try to find your question and I'll write to you if I can find you on Facebook. Yes, I know some people that you can ask about that. I don't personally have a great deal of experience with that because I haven't been around foals like that. I've been around them when they're older and the people didn't know what to do. They're kind of set in a bad way. So I will just say thank you again. And angular limb deformities. Okay, good, Tori. We'll leave that up there so that we can talk about it in the future, and I will get back to that person. I wish you were all right here. We could make dinner together. Maybe later. Maybe someday. Thanks again.